Hi, and welcome back to Continual Fandom. I'm your host, Jim Nettles, and tonight we're going to be entering back into the hellmouth and going back to high school because it is time to come in and talk about Buffy Season 1. And I got to admit, I'd rather be jumping in the hellmouth and go back to high school. But since I have a lot of high schoolers here with me this evening, let's see who has decided to sit in the classroom and boot me out of the homeroom. So, Rachel, you're up first.
Hi, I'm Rachel A. Brune, and I am a writer and an editor and a publisher. I enjoy speculative fiction, and Buffy is one of those television shows that it occupies a certain place in my heart. Even, what is it, like 10 years later now?
20?
I hate to tell you.
I kid. But yeah, I enjoy and I enjoy this sort of horror urban fantasy that we saw in this first season. So that's why I'm.
Samantha?
Hi, I'm Samantha Bryant. I'm an author. I write the menopausal superhero series and short form horror, some of it for Rachel. And I'm a big fan of Buffy as well, although I didn't get to see it when it was new because I was living in rural Alaska at the time. I didn't have a television, let alone cable. But I came to it not too far afterwards and it's one of those things that I always watch when I'm sick.
But the good news in rural Alaska is the vampires can come out and stay out later and play. Marlaina.
Hi, I'm Marlaina Cockcroft. I'm a writer and editor. I write various forms of fantasy or dark fantasy and occasionally edging over into horror. Rachel has also published a bit of my work, and she's lovely to work with. Buffy was my favorite show for a long time. I came to it a few seasons in, so a little bit late, and then very quickly got caught up pretty obsessively. And it's just it really struck a chord with me. I hadn't seen a show like that before, and I loved having that experience of being a fan of it. So,
Susan?
Hi, I am Susan Griffith. I am half of the writing team of Clay and Susan Griffith. We write historical fantasy, including the Vampire series, Vampire Empire. We've done the Crowning Key series for Del Rey, and some multimedia tie-ins for Flash and Arrow, The Tick, numerous others. And I came to Buffy straight from the get-go, and it was such a eye-opening and just delicious experience to see a woman empowered. And that is immediately what drew my attention. And even from the opening sequence, which I'm sure we'll discuss from the first season, everything gets flipped on its head where you just don't expect, your expectations are completely thrown askew. And that kind of ride was an amazing ride. So I miss it. And I'm so excited to be talking about it again, because it's something that after 20 years, it's nice to revisit.
I hate to tell you, it's been a little longer than that, too.
Wait, I have my watcher bag.
Lee, you're up next.
Oh, boy. Hi, folks. I'm Lee Martindale. I'm a short story slinger, an anthology editor, and a nano press publisher. I came to Buffy about 3 seasons in, and it's all Elizabeth Moon's fault. I saw one episode based on a conversation we had where I'm sitting there going, Buffy? I had seen the original movie, okay? And I'm going, they did what? No. Saw one episode, went back looking for the other 3 seasons. So I loved it. Mostly I loved it. There were times I didn't love it so much, but I loved the ensemble cast, the mixture of horror and humor. it didn't take much to get me hooked.
Hansi?
I'm Hansi Oppenheimer. I'm a guerrilla filmmaker and independent scholar of fan studies. And Buffy was sort of my number one fandom for many years. It was my first online TV fandom that I participated in. I participated in band fandoms. Buffy was the first time it was like TV show and, this whole pop culture phenomenon. And I came into it late. I was working in a dub house doing the satellite feed. And we did the satellite feed for whatever it was at the time, the CW, WB, UP, I don't know. It was something at that time during the 5th season. And I used to run it every week. And the 5th season is so crazy. And I'm watching and I'm like, what's going on? And then I'm watching it every week. And then next thing you know, fortunately it was in reruns. So I just backtracked, went through everything from the beginning, read every possible book I could get on. Got all the CDs, but every time I was like sad or depressed, I would just watch them over and over and cry. Yeah. It's I can't watch it anymore. It's a period in my life that was then, but it was very important to me for a long time.
Carole?
I was a fan of Buffy from the first episode. I was riveted. I loved it. When my now husband moved up at one point during the run of Buffy, I said, you have to understand, Tuesday nights is Buffy night. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. There's no alternatives. It's Buffy. Fortunately, he came to love Buffy as much as I do. But I absolutely love Buffy, became a huge fan. I love it to this day. Like any show, there are bumps along the way. There are not so great parts and really spectacular parts, but on the whole, it is a world that I had not seen before and really in many ways have not seen since, and I adore it.
So I will say this, I actually did see the first episode and first run. I was traveling back in those days and, the number of channels and your options were pretty limited sitting in a hotel room. And there were times that you were just grateful to have something to sit there and press on and looking for something different. It was one of those things of, okay, great. I'd seen the movie. I'd beat my head against the wall over the movie. But it was a fun premise to me. And I'm like, all right, I'll give it a shot. I had low expectations. So Susan, since you mentioned it, do you want to kind of give a rundown of that opening or the opening scene as you come back in, or as you come in and Mom and Buffy are coming to the grand
sure.
town?
Yeah, well, I mean, it truly does start even before Buffy arrives. You're basically introduced to two kids sneaking into high school after hours.
Jesse.
And you're thinking, oh, it's the woman's going to be the damsel in distress. Or you can tell that there's something's going to happen. There's somebody's luring somebody into the high school to do something nefarious. And everybody thinks, it's going to be the girl. She's sounding so demure. And then they flip it, and it's actually Darla, who is the vampire and is looking for a snack. And from that moment on, I was like, ooh, I like that. That gave me such a little shock at that to get my interest going, and to know that there was, that they weren't afraid to play with the tropes that were already set forth. So from that on, I was like, oh, this show could surprise me again. Let's wait and see. And that's exactly what it felt like. I mean, and then, of course, Buffy herself, who is like this, it's Buffy just from the name, and which is, exactly what was Whedon's thought, was to show somebody who nobody was going to take seriously and to give her extraordinary powers. So.
Anybody else have any thoughts they want to kind of throw in about that opening sequence?
It's like, still having watched all of it many times, that opening is one of my favorite moments in the whole thing. And it's not always like that for me when I go back to rewatch something, but that reversal of expectations, like you were saying. And that gave me such a little thrill the first time, and it still makes me smile every time. It's a really good beginning. And, I used this panel as an excuse to start to rewatch some of it again. And I got to watch 3 episodes in recent days. And it's really neat to see how much was set up so well in those first 2 episodes, because they're kind of a 2-parter.
Yeah.
That, we lay out the big arc, we introduce a lot of characters, and I felt like I really met them. Sometimes when they throw all the characters you at once, you're like, wait, which one was the blonde? It really introduced everybody well, and you got, and then we moved into kind of the monster of a week thing that I always liked that combo of like the big arc with little stories in, and Buffy was one of the first shows I knew that did that well.
So yeah, looking at Buffy, in terms of that period of time, to me, that was one of the first shows that really looked at the idea of having, you've got the episode of the week, but you also have a seasonal arc. And being that it was a show that was coming as a mid-season, they had, I think, 12 episodes to do the first series. That was a lot to pack in the first 12 episodes.
And
so when you think
Prophecy
about
Girl is just amazing. I mean, to build up to that's
in 12 episodes, especially in TV back at that period of time.
Yeah.
So, and again, this is the, stranger coming to town, having to make friends. But not only are you coming to town to have to make friends and go to a new school, you're kind of finding out that thing of you're not in Kansas anymore. And I think there was a lot of things that we see. Okay, yeah, I had to slip in the Winchesters, but
there's some crossover. I noticed there's an episode in the first season with Chad Lindbergh.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So when you look at that first couple of episodes that really sort of package up who are you going to be around, this idea of a big bad, the idea of a story arc. So, Rachel, what was it that hooked you initially? I mean, were you on the first run? Did you come back and catch it later? How did you get hooked into it?
Okay, so I realize this is not an opinion that's shared by all or even many, but I really enjoyed the movie. It had Luke Perry, okay? I didn't really require a lot out of popular entertainment at the time.
I will second. Wasn't a fan of it, but it was entertaining enough at the time, even though I rolled my eyes continuously and just went, what that? I wished it could be better. And that's why I gave the series a second shot. I was like, there was something in that show. So in that movie. So I'm with you on that. It wasn't all there, but there was a glimpse.
The movie still has one of the best death scenes ever.
Paul Rubens.
Yes. So.
But yeah, it was, it's the sort of movie where, like I said, sometimes I don't really require a lot of popular entertainment except that it be entertaining, and there was action, and then it was funny, and then you had the main character as being this badass chick. I'm like, that's kind of all I need. I can't remember if I started watching like halfway through, before you could go online and stream the episodes that you missed. And I think I did start watching it because I was like, oh, is Luke Perry in this? But he wasn't. And then I just got hooked. And I mean, at the time this was airing, I can't remember what else was on TV. I think I remember watching like Xena at the same time. And then movie-wise, The Hunger. So like I was definitely into the horror, women warrior, vampire, like that was my thing in college. And so I can't, if you were like, hey, you got to remember what was the title to this particular episode, I'd be like, I don't know. But when I was looking for stuff that was like almost comforting, here's the
Absolutely. And I find that so odd to me because that show comforted me through some serious trauma, and I have no idea why. I mean, it shouldn't be comforting. I mean, she's burdened with the whole world, and I guess I kind of felt like, well, if Buffy can handle that.
Well, she had friends. right? She had female friends.
Right, which is the reason she was the only one who survived.
Yeah, and one of the things that I really loved about especially the first season was her and Willow. I wasn't a big fan of Xander because I was like, God, just like let it go, just be her friend and stop trying to get with her. But the friendships that she was developing, to me were like, I was like, that was one of the things that I really enjoyed about the first series or the first season and then the rest of the series.
Yeah, her kindness to Willow after Cordelia, makes a big fuss over her and then is so mean to Willow. I mean, you kind of see Buffy's character that, Buffy is not about, being, with the cool crew, she's actually kind-hearted.
Which is a subversion of the cheerleaders.
I'm sorry?
It's so nice you've seen the softer side of Sears.
And the writing is brilliant. It's so quotable. I quote Buffy all the time. I have a quote on my arm, my tattoo. It's so quotable.
So, what about you, Samantha? When you came into it, what was it for you? Because you said you came in kind of third season after you, fled the Great Wilds and came Civilization.
Yeah, I had also seen the movie I think I was still in college when it came out. Wasn't that more like 91, 92, something like that? And so I had seen it and it was like, oh, this was such a good idea. I'm sorry they did it so badly, and because I very much the premise, but not so much the movie. And then my mom was watching the show, and so she would she was horrified by the idea that I was living my life without television. I guess a big difference between me and my mom, but she would videotape episodes of things she wanted me to see and mail me a tape to Alaska. And so I don't remember where exactly in there she sent me some episodes, but she did. And then later, after I moved back to the 48 and my now adult daughter was a little gal, we watched it together, taking the DVDs from my mom. My mom lent us her DVDs, and Miriam had a credit stance, and it was awesome. And she also got in trouble at preschool for playing Suck Your Blood. So these are the problems with having me for a mother.
I love it.
How about you, Marlaina? How did you fall into?
I didn't hate the movie either. I have to agree. I kind of wished it had been better, but there was stuff about it I thought was funny, and and her decimating the gym in the prom dress with the leather jacket, which I noticed all over again. They echoed in the season finale of the show. But it was fun. But I've always kind of been into vampires. I've always loved vampire stories, even the not so good ones. So, but discovering that the show was actually good and infinitely quotable. My husband and I will so occasionally quote it to each other. Not necessarily season one, but at any time something happens and, oh no, here we go. It's a here we go again situation. One of us will go to the other. Dawn's in trouble. Must be Tuesday. And sums it up.
We banned a buggard.
Wait, what's your quote?
We banned a buggard from fifth season when they go out to fight, on Claire.
Oh
Glory.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And they're all, we banned a buggard.
So Susan, how about you? How did you fall into it and get pulled into it immediately? I mean,
I'm a big television buff at that point, movie buff, TV buff, book buff. So if it was entertaining, if it had some sort of science fiction, fantasy, monster, whatever element, I was in on it. I didn't watch a lot of the Dawson Creek or any of the real life stuff. It was all fantasy, science fiction, because like Samantha, I had a very sheltered childhood, which we didn't get to watch any of those things. I couldn't watch cop shows. I couldn't watch war shows. I couldn't watch a lot of different things because they were all very violent. And that was something that when I had the freedom to watch anything, that's all I really wanted to watch was stuff that I had not had the opportunity. And after watching shows like Xena and stuff, the fact that women were taking center stage for a change was one of the first things that I noticed. And so that was the first thing that I really focused on, was like, I want to see a girl kick some monster butt. And you get that glimpse of it from the movie. I'm like, oh, that could have been so much better. Why wasn't it? And then to see that have the opportunity to come around again. And it had everything. I was a little bit older. I wasn't in the teenage age, but I was of the mindset that I wanted to be entertained and see something different. And I love vampires. I love monsters. And this was going to give me that fix that I needed. And the fact that it was a character-based show, which is something so precious, that you got to know these people, you got to care about these people. And once that started, there was no going back on that show. And that first season very easily cemented those characters for us. We didn't have to wait 3 seasons to know that group finally gelled. They gelled almost immediately.
Yeah,
and
like
that
first
is so rare.
episode. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Very rare. And so that was, it didn't take long for me to go, this is it. This is what I wanted. I wanted that interaction. I wanted that relationships. I wanted that dynamic. And, that was a fantastic thing. So to me, finding that was a gift, and I wasn't gonna stop. And to have Angel come after it, it became a whole universe. And how exciting is that? It's not something that you can get often. So when you find it, you want to keep with it and run with it. So
Do you remember they used to do crossovers, and then at one point one was UPN and one was CW or WB, whatever it was, and they weren't allowed to do crossovers. So they were like, "Oh, we meet at a special place."
Yep.
How about you, Lee? How did you fall into this world?
As I said, it's Elizabeth Moon's fault. I had seen the movie. I don't even know when. It was before the series started, and I went, okay. I mean, it had Rutger Hauer, so I was going to watch it anyway. And Pee Wee Herman's death scene was prime. Mostly, it was like I didn't pop enough popcorn. But Elizabeth and some of the folks are talking down at her place, and I'm sitting there going, they're talking about something. The movie was, why do they seem to like this? So I'm asking questions, and they're giving it basically what I've heard here. And I'm going, okay, fine. And somebody one of our local stations had just started rerunning, or had just announced they were going to rerun from the first series. So I thought, timing. So I started watching the first one and went, not bad. I mean, it was an ensemble cast, which you don't normally see. And I love that. And the fight choreography was good. The dialogue was witty. The performances,
It got better.
it got better. They weren't horrendous. They certainly weren't down to the level of the movie. But I liked what I was seeing. I liked the character dynamics for the most part. I adored, okay, confession, I adore Anthony Stewart Head.
Oh yeah.
No flaw.
I'm giving.
And the fact that he was playing such a different character than I'd seen him before, and had really solid hold on it. So, basically, yeah, hooked.
Yeah, he was such a catch for them. I mean, because Giles just brought so much to it, and then that actor, I know, like his natural speaking voice is more like Spike's accent. So I know James Marsters has talked about him, sort of helping him with the accent. It always sounds so funny when I hear James Marsters talk in his regular voice, because it always sounds to me like that Doofy episode where he pretends to be an American and he's got this, and it's just his voice.
He does.
but that basically is what hooked me, was the ensemble cast, the writing, the dynamics, and it was good storytelling. So,
and I will say, because I'm going to stick up for James Marsters, because he does an American accent. He reads our novel, the Vampire Empire series.
Oh, I love James. He's great.
And he does an American accent, but he doesn't do it the way he did it in that particular episode. He did such an amazing job of doing a incredibly elegant American accent that I became smitten all over, because I didn't think I'd ever love that other than the Spike voice. But his voice that he does on those audiobooks were like amazing.
Because I know he does like the Dresden Files and stuff.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
But it's just his regular voice. It's funny to me. But I think, like Xena, those two shows had something very in common, besides, the strong female character. It was also female friendships. It was also really, they played with genres. There was a lot of mashup of genres and a lot of meta. There was a lot of stuff about pop culture and references.
Oh, yeah. And I think that's why some people got a little off-put by it, because of so many pop cultures. They felt that they were kind of out of place. Like, my mother didn't quite get why I was like enamored with it. She's like, I don't get that reference. And I'm like, no, let me explain it to you. But a lot of people didn't, just because of that. My sister had no clue when she was watching it. She didn't get a lot of that, because that was not a culture that she was immersed in like I was. So,
there was also the thing that I fully admit, I will confess, high school was hell. Absolutely. And it nailed it.
Yeah, it was a great metaphor.
It was a great metaphor. And watching them essentially beat that dynamic. I'm sitting there going, yes, I like this. Yes. It was good for popcorn.
But Carole, how about you? I mean, when you were pulled into this series as well, because you've had a few fandoms that you live and die by. But I mean, how for you and Buffy, how'd you get pulled in?
Buffy was my first live and die. I subsequently went on to Supernatural, but I don't think I could have gotten into Supernatural the way I did had I not had Buffy. Now, I saw the movie and I didn't expect anything of it. It was funny. It was campy. That's all I saw. And I appreciated it just on those grounds. I grew up on Dark Shadows, the original Star Trek, the Addams Family and
Batman.
I mean, that's the kind of mindset I grew up on. So something like Buffy is, right in there, just like right in that zone. So I saw the movie, thought it was funny, appreciated it just for that. Is it a great movie? No. Is it campy fun? Absolutely. But when I saw the first episode, I thought, oh, they're taking this and they're going deeper and darker. And man, that is right up my alley. That is just, first episode, I was there. And the writing was crisp. Yes, we met a lot of characters, but each one of them was very individual, and not in a stereotypical way, but just vibrantly different.
It's true. How many horror films have you seen with teenagers and you can't tell it?
Or there's stereotypes like, oh, he's the jock.
Right.
Right. Whatever. No, these were just people, but they had
layers.
Values that were quickly displayed to us so that we had a clear sense of who they were, saw them interacting. I mean, even Cordelia, who's not in the group in the beginning, had her place in this. That was just juicy and tasty. And I was hooked. And I don't know how many of you remember this. Anthony Stewart, he was the Taster's Choice guy.
Right. I remember that.
All right.
Those commercials, those coffee commercials.
At that point on American television, he had been in this whole sequence of quasi-romantic Taster's Choice. I mean, and they were a big deal. It was like everybody was like, "Oh, there's a new Taster's Choice," because the little son of romance was going further. He was terrific in it, and so to see him come out and display this really fascinating character from the get-go, when he plops that vampire book, blowing up the dust cloud in front of Buffy, he's got some story behind him, and you want to know what it is. And that's how they all were. Xander, yes, he's a dork. Who doesn't have dorky friends in high school?
Who live in their parents' basement, sure.
Who wasn't that? Oh, wait, sorry. That.
There were so many different facets of everybody. Yes, Willow's the bookworm and the computer nerd, but she's more than that. And yes, Buffy's the bouncy, cute cheerleader type, but she's more than that. And the way that they were able to suggest that in the first couple of episodes was really, really skillfully done and leveraged you into wanting to know what was going to happen next. And also, they introduced that arc right away. So, yeah, we had Monster of the Week, but we had an arc. I mean, sometimes they don't introduce a season arc until later. They want to get you in. I mean, even Supernatural. Yeah, they kind of had you in the Monster of the Week for the first few episodes. This one, we met the master right away, and all other interesting things happened until the whole culmination of everything in Prophecy Girl.
So,
I think that the show did an incredible job, and it was this one of the first few shows that I remember having a story set through. But more than that, they had already designed all the characters so they have elements that you want to, you hear the word Ripper. You knew, there was some sort of dark moment in Giles's past, but you didn't really know. He's such a goofball in terms of, ineptitude and constantly getting concussed every episode.
Covered in tweed.
It's all these things, but there's some underlying dark element to him. And the same thing with all the characters. I mean, you realize that Cordelia isn't quite the shallow person that she is, that she takes notice. That Buffy, I mean, it's all the same thing that Carole said, but this was one of the few things that few shows that you actually saw that there was intent in the writing, in the way the characters were developed and how they were laying them out for us. And it was really kind of refreshing from a perspective where you've watched so many of these fandom shows just have these randomness where they're just either getting it through because they don't think you're going to stick with it and they're not going to invest until they're assured you are. But I think this was one of the few shows that actually had a lot of people sitting down and going, this is how it's all going to lay out. And these are how the people are going to be. And this is how we're going to set it up. And I think that kind of ensemble writing really is what made that show. I mean, we've had some of the best
writers.
It did. From Drew Goddard to Jane Epstein, there was so many, and they all contributed.
Marty Noxon. I mean,
yes.
And those are all even later. We're even just talking season one.
Just season one.
Joss wrote 5 out of the 12 episodes. I mean, and even the ones he didn't write, he heavily influenced. And he wanted that. He wanted the sense of the banter. I mean, who doesn't? That is what high school's like. It's full of snarky remarks and side references. And if you don't know, you don't know. And if you do, you do. And
groups of friends have their own lingo, right? Like, me and my friends get this, but you have no idea what we're talking about. That's just for me and my friends.
Yep.
Well,
and poor Joyce standing outside it. He's another character where, like, right away, the mom, but you know what? We feel for her. She's looking from the outside. She's kind of like, okay, my girl burned down the gym, but here we are starting over. And
really cheap prices here. The rental price, the price is so remarkably reduced here. I can't imagine why.
And there's so many cemeteries in town.
One of the things that I remember, even from those days, was the idea of, because I was 10 years out of high school and wasn't usually going to watch stuff that was high school and high school kids and angst and all that sort of stuff. But it was the comedy, the horror, all those aspects. I'm like, all right, I'll give it a try.
It was Scooby-Doo. We would have gone in for Scooby-Doo.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it was live action Scooby-Doo done better.
Yep.
I mean, Xander made a hell of a Scooby snack. But when watching it, one of the things I think that set it up so well was that idea of high school students, when you're that age, driven by everything that's going on at that age, you've got the ability to create very strong emotional bonds, good and bad, very quickly. So I mean, for me, looking at that, high school was kind of that perfect setup for that, for new kid in town, and you've got all the misfits, and they're like, okay, well, we can anchor this together. But everybody fit and gelled well, but in a believable way. When you look at the idea of everybody can see high school as hell, and I sure wouldn't want to do it again. I didn't want to do it the first time. But looking at that whole setup, being that idea, was there anything about the idea of this is high school? You're setting foot back into high school and watching these bonds form.
Not well. I didn't go to high school, so
Well, never mind. That made it easy. So
I dropped out in 9th grade, hitchhiked cross country, totally differently. But but I did grow up on Dark Shadows and Batman and all those things, Addams Family and stuff. So it was perfect viewing. I mean, I was just older than, I guess, the crowd they were looking for. But the high school stuff, it didn't. I mean, it was just about fighting this battle every day, getting up and fighting a struggle, no matter what it was, whether it was high school or drug addiction or getting a job or whatever I was going through my life. Buffy, was dealing with it on some level, in a much more, in a much bigger, grander way.
Part of it, though, is the fact that they're dealing with, cosmic darkness and dark forces and all of these
apocalypses.
But they're also dealing with the mundane, and the lockers and the cheese pizza for lunch in the cafeteria. And, the principal making them be in the talent show. And in the midst of all of this, they still have to exist in the mundane, everyday world of high school. And the way that they struggle to juxtapose those two sides of their existence is part of what's so compelling for us. Because one second they're like, oh my gosh, and we have to figure out why these nightmares are coming true in town. And on the other hand, around and be like, oh, it's parent-teacher night. We have to make signs.
Right.
I was teaching high school when I was watching this. And I think one of the things it really captured is how irrelevant high school feels while you're a high school student. Like, it's the setting that you're forced into, but nothing about it is what matters. And so even for kids whose horror is the horror of their lives is a lot more mundane, with things like pimples and I fought with my mom, it's still like those are the things that matter. And high school's just the setting we're stuck in. And I think this show captured that lens really well. And that's also part of why adults watching it, people who weren't in high school, didn't get fed up with the high school angst of it. It didn't spiral into some of the more stupid portrayals of high school and teenagers I've ever seen. Like, where I'll try to watch 80s movies with my now 15-year-old kid, and they'll be like, this is not what kids are like. And I said, yes, this is not what kids were like then either.
I mean, I found the show, that it took elements. I mean, just look at the episode, The Pack, where they had, that one took an element of high school that a lot of us, even whether we're in school or whether we're in a social group, had that same anxiety, felt that kind of peer pressure. And they took that and made it a complete horror element, which for high schoolers and for anybody in those situations, it can be a horror show. And most of those episodes, from the witch in the cheerleading squad, from the substitute teacher, it took teacher's pet, and all those elements. I mean, and it was happened after episode after episode, where they were basically using an element that affected you in high school or in a social environment and made it into a horror element. And that was incredibly clever, where we all got that anxiety from those situations. I mean, I was like devastated when when the principal Flutie died. I
Or
was
even
upset.
the science teacher.
The science teacher, Dr. Gregory.
He puts his glasses back. I mean, it's such a sweet,
because he
gentle
had
moment.
faith in her. He was the only one who had faith in her after Flutie, and she never got that validation again from another teacher for quite a while. And it was, those were important elements, I thought.
So, or in nightmares where they are literally face to face, or the Willow, the shy, shrinking, don't look at me, is like has to sing this operatic aria, with the world-renowned Turner. And Xander is going along like, oh, I got all these great candy bars. And he's like, oh, crap. There's that clown that scared the crap out of me back when I was little, and played with all their fears like that. They just really were good at arrowing in on that. I mean, even Teacher's Pet, there's the substitute teacher thing, but there's also the thing where boys were always like bravado about their conquests, and trying to appear more experienced and worldly than maybe they were, and then like, oh, you know what? She picked you. You're a virgin. So all these great things where he's constantly, they're skewering in on these little vulnerable points and making us re-experience all those feelings ourselves again.
I'd read, excuse me, I'd read somewhere that he had asked, like in the writer's room, everybody to write down like some of their most horrible experiences. And then they would create a monster based on whatever that feeling or experience was.
I mean, Out of Sight, Out of Mind was like one of the another one that was like that. And
it's the Clea Duvall, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So Marlaina, for you, what was it? Was there anything about that setting, that time?
So I have no problem with watching or reading stuff set in high school, because I genuinely don't think most people get past high school. Like, how they act in high school is just how they are for the rest of their lives. And you just get older. So, but one of the things a lot of the things that I liked about the show were what you said, that metaphorical nature of it. The girl is ignored for so long, she literally becomes invisible. It's just, it hits at something that is emotionally real. It holds through the lens of horror, and I always thought that was really cool. So there was
that story holds up still.
Yeah, no, I was just rewatching it. It definitely does. But it hits an emotional. It uses horror to hit at emotional truths, which I think is a really excellent way of doing it.
Rachel?
So I was a sophomore in college, I think 97. And so I wasn't really that far removed from high school. But I had kind of a different high school experience. I went to a Catholic school for high school, and I was with a group of friends that didn't really, there just wasn't those stark, stereotypical high school experiences that some people have. So for me, it was just like, oh, cool, they get to eat lunch outside. Oh, that's pretty neat.
I went to Catholic school too, so I totally get what you're saying.
I'm a little bit with Hansi in that I don't necessarily watch the show all the time anymore. Some time has gone by, and I look at stuff like, so there's this guy Angel who's about 100 some odd years older than her, and he's creeping on a high school student.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Guess we're gonna go with that. But it's there's for me, if you tell a good story, then the setting that it's in can work with that story. And yeah, they were high school kids, but they were being forced to deal with some very adult situations, life and death situations, decisions about whether or not to. So Cordelia, who is actually one of my favorite characters.
Oh, absolutely.
she keeps ending up with the Scoobies.
Yeah.
Because
The spatula, Cordy. He's the spatula.
Right? And it's because I think that she can't be an all-around terrible person. And I now have my kids of my own who enjoy watching shows that are ostensibly set in high school. And a lot of these shows have the mean girls. And those mean girls are like, that's who they are. That's their stereotype. That's who they are. And I think maybe if this were a show that was coming out today, maybe Cordelia would be through and through a mean girl, but she just never is. And to me, that's a mature, like that's something that made it an attractive character, even if I'm no longer in high school, if I'm no longer in college. And I'm like, dang, my kids keep growing and going into grades with higher numbers, and I don't know what to do about it.
Yeah, mine's 43.
Well, and looking at Cordelia, for me, one of the things that I think was interesting was initially you get that read of the mean girls sort of trope sort of thing, but to me it was much more of the almost clueless of the position she was in until she got the hard lesson of she's not. And it was I'm at a core, I'm not the bad person, but I'm of this station. You should know where you're at. And then all of a sudden you get that lesson that says, not that big of a difference. And all of a sudden when life comes to hit you and smack you upside the head, you have to figure out who are the people that will stand with you, even if they're not necessarily the popular ones, who's going to stand with you. And so we've not even really gotten much into the details of season 1, but let's actually talk about the end of season 1, because obviously it was written to be an arc. You can almost tell that there was maybe an expectation of, we're going to get our 12 shows, have our big apocalypse, going into that idea of the prophecy, and the chosen one has to die, and all of these things that just line up throughout the entire season of challenging that way to then come in. You've been facing the master. You've had an angsty relationship blow to hell in a handbasket and had to kill your boyfriend. Who hasn't thought about killing a spouse at some point or another? But
I'm not saying that out loud.
And the first guy she's with who treats her like crap after, that's such a classic.
But then to face the first apocalypse, it's Tuesday, there's an apocalypse. So when you saw kind of that real full season arc coming in, how did you feel about that wrap up?
I think that's the strongest episode of the season, actually. And I like generally the other episodes, but that finale is so strong and it's so well done. And it just makes the entire season worth it. It's such a good payoff.
It's got a nice wrap, we start by having our expectations subverted when the girl in danger turns out to be the danger. And then we've got they're going to have to sacrifice themselves, but, they don't have to stay dead. So I really liked that wrap. And as much as I enjoy, the entire series, none of the other seasons are as well wrapped as that, as even throughout. And, I guess it's sometimes what you see in a lot of things, like the first novel in someone's series is something they've been working on for 15 years and they've thought about it forever. And it's beautiful in every detail. And then they got a contract and the second book is due 1 year later. And it's still quite good, but you can see that it just hasn't had that depth of thought and exploration to get it there. You can tell that the creative process was a lot shorter. And that's how I feel about the seasons of Buffy, even though there are episodes that I love in all of it, as far as like holding together as a piece, that first season was something special.
I think one thing I like in the first season is that we see Buffy herself, going through this whole process of, I'm the vampire slayer, backing away from it, refusing it, fighting against it. And yet, episode after episode being brought to the point where she has to do it. And then finally the prophecy, and she hears it, and she's like, were you even going to tell me? Is it going to hurt? And she's desperately fighting against it. But then in the very end, she has to do it, and she knows it, and she goes and does it. And it's only because of the fact that they have built this ensemble that she actually survives. Nobody pictures her surviving.
Yeah.
And she does. And that
Angel Xander combo.
I have no breath. I mean, that was a great line. And that's the whole thing. It's her support group. And they use that all the way through. But her speech to Giles,
I don't want to die.
At the thing was, tell me my fortune. That is one of the most powerful speeches. And because she's like you said, she was trying to get out of it. She didn't want this. And all she wanted to do was just be a normal kid in school and enjoy school and not look at the past, not worry about the gym being burnt down, all that stuff she wanted to escape, and yet she couldn't. And then here, the prophecy, of course, is telling her she's going to die. And then to have to deal with that at that moment, and then she goes, fine, I'm going to do it, and picks up the weapon and goes to war. It was a great moment for that character, and gave me chills just even watching it again, going, wow, they really did some great writing on that, because it wasn't something that you would expect going in. So I think they did a fantastic job, but it was all about her survival because she had a support group where none of the other Slayers ever had that. And that is a theme that they continued all the way through, and I've always loved.
Yeah, it's every time they try to split up the group, they all, they all, lose their stuff. They can't keep it together. It's whenever they're trying to hide stuff from each other. But I just keep thinking of that running joke in the Prophecy Girl where I like your dress. I know, and she's just like, yeah, I know.
They were so great about blending those little bits of humor in so that we weren't so
brutalized.
We're like, oh my God, why am I even watching this?
It's dark. It's a dark show. And
it's a dark show, but it has those little glints. It's like when somebody's wearing a black sequin dress and it's black, but then you catch these little moments of reflected light.
Yeah, it definitely helps ease the and it lets you sort of accept the trauma and the angst in a way. It makes it more palatable. But yeah, she kicked butt in that scene. She was turned.
There was something I spotted in the finale of that season. I think we got the first hint of, okay, Giles was an academic watcher. He knew what the book said. I don't think he'd ever actually worked with one. And he didn't realize that it wasn't just all laid out, A, B, C, D, that this is what happens. We got the first glimmer of maybe the connection between them to the build up in the following, but just the first hint.
Yeah.
And it was brilliant.
Yeah, that he wasn't just going to watch her die.
Yeah.
He became her father, and just like every father, they think that there's a book or there's a way that they can methodically get through it, and then he realizes there isn't. This is you have to go with it and work off of them. And I think that again, just another element to that show where they threw in that he became a father figure for her, because her father they're divorced, her parents are divorced, and she has no father figure, and that Giles takes up that. To be able to read that and even as a watcher realize there's something special about her, that there is something special that he has to do that's unlike any of the watchers before him and what he's been trained to do. So,
guys, we've gone on pretty well here talking about season 1, and we haven't even barely scratched the surface.
We need part 2.
We need another part 2. Yes. But before we can do part 2, we got to wrap up part 1. So let's make sure everybody knows where to find you guys, and we'll start seeing what we can do about another round of this. But before we get out of here, because there's no adults in the room, because I sure as hell am not one, We're going to go backwards. So, Carole, where can everybody find you? Website, social media, all that kind of good stuff.
I'm Carole Stokes on Facebook. I am true_firesign10 on Twitter, and all of my fan fiction is on AO3 under firesign10.
Hansi?
I have a website, squeeprojects.com, and my handle on Instagram and Twitter is squeeprojects or squeeprojects LLC.
Lee?
Harphaven.net, HARPHAVEN.net. There are links to my blog, my e-store, and the bibliography and all that sort of thing. On Twitter, I'm Lee_Harphaven. On Facebook, Lee Martindale. I've got it set for friends only on conversations. So send me a DM and remind me where we met, because I will have slept since then. Maybe. But that's it.
Susan?
You can find me at clayandsusangriffith.com. You can also find us on Facebook as Susan Griffith or Clay Griffiths, separate or together. You can find us on Twitter at Susan Z Griffith, and I don't know what Clay's is, but I'm sure you can just find Clay Griffith. He'll be fine. Just look for lots of cats and lots of bears. And let's see. I think that's pretty much the most places we hang out.
I still can't believe you gave him top billing on the website.
Oh, we're changing that.
Good job, Jim.
Marlaina.
So you can find my website is my name's marlainacockcroft.com. There are links there to, where you can look to read some of my my published fiction. I am on Twitter at mdcroft, and send cat photos my way.
Samantha?
Hi, I'm Samantha Bryant, and you can find me and my work at samanthabryant.com. And if you would prefer just to be silly with me, I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Samantha B Writer, just the letter B in the middle. Most of you get pictures of small dogs and mushrooms.
And Rachel?
You can find me on my website, which is infamous-scribbler.com. And you can also find anthologies that I've published on www.cronegirlspress.com. If you hang out on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, you can find us either at Crone Girls Press, or if you want to see what I'm up to, which is usually me crying about deadlines, at Rachel A. Brune, Rachel A. Brune.
And you currently have an anthology out that I think a lot of Buffy fans would like.
Oh,
we did. We just published A Woman on Becoming, which is our charity anthology of women's rage and power against the machine, especially the machine that wants to take away reproductive health care rights.
awesome.
Fantastic.
And I've had the pleasure of trying to stay out of the way of this one.
Smart man.
Yeah, well, not often, but occasionally. And you can find me at jamespnettles.com, authoressentials.net, authoressentialsworkshops.com, the Speculative Fiction Academy, and of course, here at ConTinual. And we'll see all you kids again soon.